Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about the state of Resto Druid in the Dragonflight beta. I was hoping to get some of these videos out a bit earlier, but we just had our first weekend of Mythic Plus testing like a week ago, so I finally got to do some dungeons on Druid and some other classes, and I can actually share my thoughts on how the class feels to play. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about strength in this video, since I sort of expect a decent amount of tuning to happen over the next month or two. I do assume, however, that most parts of what's in the kit and the interactions that the talents have are going to stay mostly the same. So for starters, a lot of druids have been a little bit disappointed with my first impressions on the class, mainly because it's going to play extremely similarly to how druid is in Shadowlands. There aren't really too many new parts of the toolkit, and almost all of the borrowed power from Shadowlands is returning. You have Convoke, Adaptive Swarm, you have Double Life Bloom, Circle of Life and Death, and so on. This isn't really a bad thing, though. I mean, if you like the way Druid plays now, then it's going to keep playing that way. Another thing to consider is that Druid has been a solid dungeon healer for most of Shadowlands, and I think a lot of what held it back is it just didn't sort of have that big damage thing that a lot of the other healers did. So for instance, Vesper for Shaman in Season 2, Ashen Hollow for Pally in Season 1, Boon, and then eventually Night Fae for Holy Priest. And none of those things are coming back, but Druid still has all of its damage kit, and also is even getting a little bit more. Although it really hasn't been a #1 choice for World First keys, I do think it's always been capable of doing those keys. I think if you played a ton of Druid during Shadowlands and you're sick of it, you might not find enough new to just really make you want to keep playing it unless you're a diehard Druid. However, if you're someone like me who didn't really play as much Druid last expansion because it just wasn't as popular, then it's going to be, I think, a fresh return to the class. I've actually been having a lot of fun relearning it and trying to heal some of the harder dungeons on the beta. It just feels like a genuinely really well-rounded healer. You're very durable with your passives, and you can even take more on the class tree if you want to make yourself even tankier. You can do really strong sustained healing on one target or a group of targets. You have so many AoE healing cooldowns, including stuff you can use on the move, stuff like Flourish and Convoke. So, and some bosses that I found pretty hard to heal with some of the other healers, it's actually pretty easy to heal as Druid. You do have a little bit of a problem with burst single target healing, because Swiftmend requires a heal over time to consume. It takes 2 globals to use the Swiftmend. You want to have a hot on somebody and then use the Swiftmend, and then that doesn't even really heal a lot, so you usually have to follow it off with a regrowth. One thing I found myself doing is using Wild Growth right before a single target damage event, just so I know I would have a hot on the target. And then you also have to make good use of your Iron Bark and your Nature Swiftness as well. The Druid damage rotation I think is pretty good right now. I mean, you have AoE options. You can do pretty much uncapped AoE or close with Sunfire and then Swipe, and Starfire if you're playing Boomkin Affinity. You have lots of good single target tools. You still have Adaptive Swarm. Convoke can be good on single target. You have Nature's Vigil now and Heart of the Wild. Druids have really good utility. I mean, all the stuff that you're used to, like Typhoon, Vortex, Battle Res, and so on. I really do think Druids kind of have it all, and I think it's really hard for Druid to be a bad healer. It's not to say that it's going to be the best healer, but it's very likely not going to be the worst healer or anywhere close. It's just a matter of sort of how the tuning falls. If it's contributing the most damage and healing, if it's going to be brought to the high keys. I do want to mention a few different things though, because it isn't totally the same as it is in Shadowlands. I think 2 of the big things that are kind of underrated that no one's really talking about are Mark of the Wild, as well as 60-second cooldown on Stampeding Roar. Mark of the Wild is a 3% verse buff for your whole team. So Druids went from having no party buff to having, in my opinion, what is one of the best ones in almost all scenarios, which is very, very good. I mean, that's 3% damage on your whole team plus that damage reduction. Stampeding Roar on a 60-second cooldown will help so much in setting up pulls. Honestly, in a lot of the dungeons right now, there's a lot of just running around, and they try to make a lot of the dungeons really big. It's sort of the theme of the expansion. And I think Roar is actually going to be really useful for just getting down these annoyingly long flights of stairs, or just running around in general. I think these two things alone will shave like 30 seconds to a minute off of your timer, like just having those two abilities, which is going to be insane because I think Druid is still, brings a lot of other stuff, and so that's like a really, really hefty amount of healer contribution that it's bringing. Nature's Vigil is a cool damage buff, but it's kind of boring, so what I ended up doing is I just ended up macroing it to my Flourish, and I would just throw out a lot of rejuves and like life blooms and send wards and then just like flourish them, even if I didn't necessarily need it. It ended up doing like 10 to 15% of my damage in dungeons, which, I mean, is handy, it's nice, but it doesn't, like, I didn't even have it hotkeyed, I just macroed it into my Flourish. It didn't really change the way I played. Protector of the Pack could also be a cool build. That's on the far left side of the tree. It basically just buffs your Moonfire damage. I didn't really try it a whole lot. It's kind of hard to measure how good it is. It's hard because there's things that, like, everything at the bottom of the class tree is actually pretty good. You do want the Nature's Vigil. Also, the 6% haste from Lycara's teachings and the stuff in the middle, like the short roar, is really good. So I'm not really sure what druids are going to settle on. Maybe you might end up not doing the roar stuff. Also, like the improved rejuve might be something you skip out on. I'm not sure. On that topic, though, that free 6% haste node, the Lycara's teaching, is actually going to be awesome for early X-Pack. Normally, Druid feels like kind of junky and like weird when you just have really low haste and you're just kind of like throwing whatever gear you have on. But with that node, you actually get a free just 6% haste whenever you're in healing mode. So even though my gear was just random stats and like normal raid item level and testing, I still had like 23% haste when I was in human form, just because of that talent boosting it up. The spec talent tree also has some cool passives that synergize with your hots. They're not super interesting, but they're at least powerful. I was trying to play a build where I was buffing my life bloom a lot and then playing Circle of Life and Death. When I was straight healing, I could do like crazy amounts of healing, but it was just pretty difficult to maintain just because all of my hots were so short. I had so many different things that I had to press. Like you have Cenarian Ward, Efflow, and Adaptive Swarm that you're pressing every 30 seconds. Then you're juggling 2 life blooms, each one every 12 seconds or so. I felt like I wasn't being as efficient as I could be, so maybe I shouldn't be taking all of those talents. I should maybe be taking some easier stuff, like Improve Convoke or Embrace the Dream, something like that. Or maybe I just need to get good. I'm not sure. In Raid, this class is definitely going to be a powerhouse, though, and while that might make you excited, it actually kind of worries me because, well, if Resto Druid is blasting healing in Raid and everyone complains, which they already do, it's going to get nerfed really, really heavily. And then if it all of a sudden can't do the throughput, or it's just not that throughput specialty, then it's like, well, now there's a lot less reason to bring it an M+. The tier set seems like it's actually pretty good. It's gotten nerfed, speaking of raid nerfs, it's gotten nerfed a couple of times over the course of the beta. Right now it's basically giving you 5% crit on your major healing spells, and the 4-piece buffs your wild growth. Essentially, if you're putting Efflow down, it's just going to max buff it, just a 25% buff to every wild growth, which is really, really nice. Yeah, like basically, as long as there's an Efflow on the ground, it's going to build up those stacks really, really quick. It also has a cooldown reduction on Nature Swiftness. I didn't seem to get it working in the beta. I think that's still a work in progress, but that cooldown reduction for Nature Swiftness doesn't work for me. But I think it should be nice to help with that burst, like single target healing that I was talking about when you're playing double life bloom. The one thing is your tier set doesn't help your damage, but that's most of the healer tier sets. Most of them are not very interesting. Even the damage gains you get from some of the other tier sets aren't really super noticeable. Overall, though, I was really, really enjoying my time playing Druid. I think anytime there was like a really tough key that we wanted to try, Druid was kind of my go-to just because it was doing so much healing, and it felt pretty safe to try and keep myself alive. I could Barkskin often in bear form, and I could talent into like Thick Hide and some of the other defensives. I think you can also do a crazy amount of damage too. I mean, again, I'm trying not to talk about tuning because there's still, it's something up in the air. I do think healer damage at this point is interesting to talk about though, because I don't know how much tuning of healer damage they're going to do. I think they're mostly concerned about raid stuff. So Disc Priest is always, it's always worried that Disc Priest might get nerfed, but other than that, I don't think they're going to touch most healers. And from what I've seen, Resto Druid is putting out like pretty competitive damage to every other healer, alongside its crazy, just good healing amount, good utility, very mobile, has stealth, battle res, all the good stuff. So I think, I'm not really sure, because honestly, some of the other healers are very strong too. This is the first expansion where you just have so much power starting off compared to the last two, BFA and Shadowlands. I'm not really sure what to expect, but I really do enjoy Druid. I think if you enjoy the Druid gameplay of Shadowlands, you will enjoy Druid as well. In terms of if it's going to be meta or not, you know, who knows? It is what it is. So that wraps up my quick introduction and thoughts on Resto Druid. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys have been into the beta, if you've been playing it, drop a comment and let me know what you think. Also, I'm going to try and machine gun a couple of these videos for each of the healers, at least that I've played. Should be, I've played everything but Mistweaver and Evoker so far, and M+, and I hope to get to that next weekend. So anyway, thanks for watching, friends, and good luck in your end of season keys or your beta keys, and happy keying.